So welcome everyone to today's midnight training session on scheduling within the dynamic job board. Today we're going to take a look at the three core areas of the DJB: the dynamic job board itself, the shop floor DJB view, and also the calendar and timeline views within the dynamic job board. For starters, I'll jump into our admin menu, and under our global settings, we have a tab for the DJB. Under this tab, we have a list of all the various statuses that you can see and assign to your services on the dynamic job board. You can create new ones by clicking New and typing in your information here with a priority for sortation method handling, the status name itself, and also a solid color to fill the cell with based on whatever option you pick. By clicking the active checkbox, you make it available for use on your dynamic job board. And if you no longer wish to use one of the statuses that we have here or don't wish to repurpose them, you can simply uncheck the box. By clicking Update, you then add a new instance. Additionally, we have the urgency list. This urgency is the job urgency. This job urgency is what ties into the orders themselves for sort methods. They can be given and modified with a color code or simply created new entirely. When you're within the order, you will see this as a selectable dropdown within the Details tab of the order itself. And any changes you make on the dynamic job board will be addressed here. There's also a controller for the calendar view, which changes its view based on time range. And much like your Microsoft Outlook calendar, you can select it to display in intervals. By default, we have 30 minutes selected, but we will be able to add new ones in here in the future for hour blocks or 15-minute blocks. Lastly, although not relevant to today's session, if you're utilizing our shop floor app, anytime somebody starts work on a particular task and does not complete it, that work is defaulted to in progress. This in progress is the same one that we see down below. So if you change the color of this row, it will change anything that someone is logging in via shop floor with. If you scroll down a bit more, you'll see that I have controls for the shop floor DJB view. This is a much less interactable version of the job board, but it is one that displays the information in a more bold and user-friendly way for large screens. By default, the shop floor dynamic job board view is a department-based view with options to have cycling between the departments. You can set the board to update every so often. You can set it to automatically shuffle through your departments every so often. And you can also set it to auto scroll downwards based on the amount of services that you have for a particular department. Finally, you can change the default image that you see in the background. If you wish to upload a new file, make sure that it fits within the criteria of this resolution. Otherwise, it stretches and may not necessarily fit the needs of what you're trying to do. Additionally, in our admin menu, we have our employees list. Any employee that you have listed in here that can be given any work for scheduling should have their information plugged in here under the kiosk code under job tracking, so that way they can log themselves in for work. Additionally, as long as the employee is active, they can actually log in and update themselves or have themselves assigned to any particular task on the dynamic job board. We also have our machines and machine department list. The machines themselves can be given a name, description, and code. The machine name is what you see on the dynamic job board. The start time and stop time interact with our timeline and calendar view, so that way when scheduling out specific services to operate during specific times, you're not setting up a machine to work in a time frame that it's not allowed to. You can consolidate these machines into machine departments. The machine departments that we see here can be expanded to show all machines included. To control which machines are part of a specific department, you can click the Add Machines on the right-hand side. Simply click the checkbox to plug in or uncheck any checkboxes to remove machines that are not part of your scheduling area. And hit Save and Close to commit. To edit the department, if you click the Edit button, you can change the default times that the department is available to run on. To change the machine times, you can only do this in the machines list. To add a new machine or machine department, in the gray area towards the bottom, you can type in your new department. Plug in any available times that are necessary for the operation. And once you click the Save button, it commits that as a department. You can alternatively check the X button to remove it from your list. You'll see that this doesn't actually delete it. It only marks it as inactive. Alternatively, you can edit and uncheck the checkbox for active to deactivate this item. And this is the same with our machines list. Lastly, I'll jump into our standard services window. Under here, the services themselves can be given a specific machine or machine department to be worked against. If I open up, say, our ink jetting service, you can see that I have the machine department and machine department blank. If I were to jump into another one like folding, you'll see that I can associate a machine department of finishing, which includes my folders. Having the machine department selected consolidates the list of the machines available for a particular service. This is convenient since otherwise you'd have a full list of all of your machines. You can pick a specific machine within a department to be the go-to machine for that service. If you have both selected, then the machine's automatically scheduled with an estimated start time, and it does show up on the calendar view of the dynamic job board. If you prefer to manually schedule your services, just leave a machine department selected, but don't actually pick the machine. In addition, this works with in tandem the auto schedule option. If you do have the machines selected, but not the auto schedule option, then you'll have the machine preloaded, but no start time or end time calculated out. Here, I have the folding service set to automatically schedule itself 2 days out from the order's due date. I also have it set to appear on the dynamic job board itself, and also under the shop floor display view. You may not want all of your services to appear on the DJB or the shop floor view. For instance, a credit memo service or a discount service don't really belong on a production board of any kind. Subsequently, not having these checked would mean that you wouldn't have a machine to schedule them to, and you wouldn't be able to place them onto a calendar. Finally, as long as your service is marked as active, you will be able to see it on the DJB with these boxes checked. And the service name is what you'll see on the dynamic job board. The run rate is what derives the estimated time for completion on anything that's scheduled out. And that's it for our admin list. So if we take a look at the dynamic job board, how to get into it is as simple as clicking the calendar button that we have here. This pops up a new window. Under here, you can work within your primary window, such as editing orders or managing inventory, and also view the dynamic job board here. You can do this, so be aware that if you do make changes to an order in one section, you may not necessarily see that change reflected in the other immediately. For instance, if I were to modify the urgency of this job, if I change this to high and then open up my job, until I click submit to commit that change, I won't actually see that I've committed the urgency update. If I were to submit this and hit save and refresh to commit my job board, I could then exit and re-enter the job, and then I'd see the change. And this goes for other areas too, not just the urgency. You can adjust some of the date information, the CSRs, the sales reps, and a little bit of additional info regarding the order itself. Up at the top of this screen, you can see all the data that you can modify. You can also pull reports from this view within the order pop-out itself. By default, we have a packing slip, pull ticket, work orders, and a versions pull ticket available. You can pick and choose what's available in that drop-downs list by editing under the admin menu the report objects list, and then by checking yes for the show on DJB option for any particular report. This is useful if you have any custom work orders, maybe a production report or a pull ticket that doesn't match the formatting of our standards. By default, it will not be available there. If you change this, then it does become available here. You'll see that my employee list is made up of the employees that I have active within my system. And the equipment list for these various services will update based on the department selected for them. Some lists may be longer than others, of course, based on the department that's selected. For instance, under my mailing tab, we can see under our inkjetting that because we don't have a department selected, there's no machine available. Under our folder, we have the machines listed here. Under our stamps, we've got quite an assortment of machines to pick from. One other thing to note between the two screens is that the priority that you see here is not the same as the priority that you have within the order window itself. For instance, order 1602. Has a couple of different priorities for the services within it. Under the finishing tab, we could see those priorities. You see on the job board of our various services, our postcard addressing and returning don't necessarily appear. Oh, mailing, sorry. They don't appear to have the same priority as the 1, 2, and 3 that we see here versus the 3 and 4 that we see here. That's because this priority is independent for sorting within the dynamic job board itself versus the priority in the order form, which is typically reserved for either priority of grouping for billing purposes or just core information for your job tickets when printing them through the order itself. If you're not happy with the columns that you see on screen, you can click the drop-down arrow on any of the columns to access the full list of what's available. By mousing over the columns list, you'll see what's active and what's not, allowing you to turn on and turn off columns that don't necessarily matter, and just give yourself a user-based view that will match for what you need it to. By user-based view, this means that you can log in on a different PC and see your user settings, such as different columns that you'd like to see, under any machine at any time. And if another user were to log in on your computer, they would see their particular view. You can do this for both the task view and the order view, as these are pretty similar. Do note that the views between these two are a little different, such as you'll be able to complete an entire order and all the services within it from the order view, as well as update the order progress as a whole, or the version status of any particular version on a multi-version job. Whereas under the task view, all you do under there is complete and schedule the individual tasks. In order to get a service and anything within that particular job to appear on the job board, the only thing that's necessary is that your job have a due date. This due date drives in which order the services and the jobs themselves appear on the DJB. By default, the sort method is the job due for the order view, and the task due or task start within the mailing, finishing, and other tabs within the task view. As long as you've got that date selected and the checkbox is checked for the services themselves, it'll appear scheduled out as far as you have them selected to. You can, of course, change this for any of your services that have it preloaded, or adding a new one by clicking into the cell and selecting your time and your date. Do note that you do receive a warning if you try to schedule out something that is past the actual due date for the job. You can still commit it, but it would trigger the pop-up that you just saw. Now, these changes that I've made won't actually commit until I click the Save and Refresh button, in which case then you'll see the red arrow vanishes and the sort method changes if necessary. If your team isn't using the shop floor system for the data collection to actually schedule out and mark work as being done, you can update the statuses here to the statuses that we saw in the other window. And like we saw for all of our other areas, after saving, you can sort by the column by clicking the column to either do an ascending or descending order. You can also use these as a search filter to search for only criteria that meets whatever these needs are. And you can clear your criteria by clicking the Clear Filters button to remove everything and reset the sort method back to its default. You can also see anything that you've marked as completed by checking the Show Completed Tasks box. If the service is completed, it falls off of the shop floor application for login and logout for job costing. If you need to update those entries or perhaps undo the completion of a specific status, Or if an entire job is completed, undo the completion of all services within that job. You need to show your completed tasks. Preferably look up your job itself and just undo the services within it. Do note that even though you can unclose a job to be able to reset the services, you can have completed services with closed jobs, and you can have open services with closed jobs. So just be careful when editing the status of your work. Lastly, before we get into scheduling, if you do wish to plug time in to show that your work is actually being done, you can quickly check the estimated time to see an approximation of how the work would be expected to complete itself. For instance, a operation here of running for about 20 minutes or 1/3 of an hour is calculated by the quantity divided by the run rate. This can be overwritten if need be. You'll see that it will automatically update the other field. If we say that we are expecting to work on this for half an hour, you'll see our run rate changes to 2,000 in this case. By clicking submit, it commits our estimated hours. And then we can use the actual time hours to actually log our work against the particular task. By clicking this, you can click the employee that's doing the work, select the operation that they're participating in, plug in a time frame of how much work they're actually doing, and plug in any notes necessary. You can see now I've worked for 3/4 of an hour on a job that would normally have taken me only about half an hour. This will come into reporting later, and I'll demonstrate that towards the end of the session. Now, depending on the process of your individual workplace, if you have a dedicated scheduler, or if the employees on the floor themselves are responsible for scheduling their own tasks, they can schedule something out by selecting their names here, or you can have someone internally that monitors and manages the scheduling of all employees. After saving a user, you could then go into the report and confirm it, or click the schedule button on the calendar icon here to commit this operation. Click on my filter and look at a recently entered job. We'll see this print operation is scheduled to start on the 10th or tomorrow. By clicking the name, in this case, Scott Smith, and selecting the machine that we're doing the work on, we can now actually mark the work as being ready to be scheduled. You'll see I have another here. This one may have been mistakenly changed to printed, so I'll adjust this, mark it as in progress, and again, pick my machines and my user. You'll see that my status is changing to scheduled in each case. When I click save and refresh, then it commits that and our calendars are updated. If you click the scheduled button or the calendar button, you can instead schedule this manually. By clicking the green checked boxes, you can see what the scheduled operation is and details on it, such as how much is being worked on and the amount of hours that are estimated for completion. You can modify this and change the start time and end time by just picking and choosing from this below, or by manually typing in. You'll see that this calculation of 1 hour and 15 minutes automatically updates my end line after I modify my start line. And of course, the status, if we need to schedule this and adjust it, would just involve changing the status here. Clicking Save modifies any work that we have on the calendar. And the same goes for an instance that does not have anything scheduled yet, in which case you can click the calendar button itself. And with no machine selected, you can pick your machine and have your time calculated out. I've now scheduled this service. I have not yet given an employee to it. An employee is not mandatory. The machine is the key factor here. Now, after confirming all this, I can either click into the job to see where in tandem all of the other operations are for the job. And I can also schedule from within here. Or I can click the order view and do the same. Additionally, for a service that cannot necessarily be completed in one fell swoop, you can click the task 1/1. Under here, you can break out your operation to multiple time frames. For instance, if we require a little additional time, perhaps for some rework, we can put in a new estimation of a start time and any other associated data for it. That way we update our information accordingly and get as much accurate scheduling data as we can plugged into the calendar. In this case, now I have a new time which I can update. And I can see that I've got a two-part task here with both being listed as in progress. In a case like this, I'd want to add notes. On the primary view or in the order view here, you can click the notes pop out. This allows you to enter any details that you feel necessary. And by committing the notes, you have a timestamp as well as a date stamp and the username who logged in the work. That way you can see the information piled in descending order. You can also print this, so that way you can have a list of all details printed out as necessary. And this works in tandem with the report itself for the job board, which allows you to pick and choose what data you see based on a specific time frame, defaulting to today, or a full time range or a null time range, referring to anything that you see on the screen. This report will update based on selections that you make. For instance, if I pick a filter for employee Jeff Jones, you'll see I have 4 services here. When I open my report, by removing the date variable, I now have 4 services that display on my report. Similar efforts can be done in the order view, in which case you can print a report that shows core information on your reports based on what you see on screen. And any filters you apply can be displayed and referred to in the report pop-out after you apply that search. I do note, if you have a lot of fields available on your screen, the new fields will not update themselves onto the report, simply the data that would be shown. In this case, you can see we have a lot of data available. You can remove these by condensing everything from the left to the right by just unchecking the boxes here under my view. Despite our system having up to 30 user-defined fields for versions and for orders, we only have the first 10 available in these cases. If you need anything else built into the dynamic job board for a view handler that you don't see here, that you see on the order level, do let us know. Next, I'll take a look at the shop floor display view. Under here, we can see any of the outstanding services or not yet completed services within a particular department. Bear in mind that this does feature those elements for auto-scrolling if you have them enabled. For departments that have more work being done, this is a visual of what the auto-scroll looks like. We shall have a vertical up and down, or one that you can do yourself by clicking to make sure that everything gets shown as needed. The icons themselves here represent the tasks as you would see in a task view, with these icons under the progress column referring to your different service types. You'll see each department, data, prep, print, etc., they all have their own icon. As an icon's work is completed from a specific department, that icon will gray itself out, indicating that the next option or next group of work needs to be done. Typically, in a warehouse, you'll have multiple rooms for production, one for print, one area for inserting and handwork, etc. Using this way to communicate from one department to the other, as work is completed, those colored icons will fall off, or gray out in this case, like you see here for this line 1616. And that can be a way to communicate to your next department that they should begin work on whatever task they have incoming. You can modify the settings of the scrolling and everything in the dynamic job board by clicking the gear icon here for settings and updating the refresh time and rotating time, just as we saw in the admin menu. We can also click to manually refresh the DJB's shop floor view, noting that default every 5 minutes the system will do this itself. Finally, you can click the orders, which brings you to the order pop-out, allowing you to modify data from this window. While this is typically reserved for operations view only, you can still do what you need to do from here in terms of making simple edits. As the service list is completed, or the order itself is completed, when there are no more services for a specific job that's considered open to show up as work, then the entire job itself falls off of both this view and the primary job board. So at this point now we can move on to our version statuses view. Under here, our jobs, even single version jobs, are considered to be versions. Under here you can see each version's status along with a color code for the priority for that specific job. In this case we have yellow for the high priority job. We can see all of our others here listed with no other significant priority. We can double click to enter the order pop-out for that specific job and modify data for it as we see fit. We can also click and drag it to move it to a different department's worth of status. In this case, now I've given the version status of proofing here, which we can see updated here. This is also available within the order itself under the Info tab. This version is what we'll see on the job board's version status view when applied. Do note that this does grow wider for each version status that you utilize. So if you're trying to view everything all in one monitor, you may need to either shrink your view or consolidate 2 monitors to this view if it won't fit everything you need to see all at once. Last up, we have the calendar view and timeline views. The calendar view shows you which tasks have been scheduled and which machine that they're scheduled on. If our services are flagged to auto-scheduled, they'll show up on here automatically as soon as an order has a due date that's applied to itself. Once the task has actually been scheduled, you can move it to a different time slot on a different machine or even a different day. By clicking in your machine department, you can change what it is that you see. By clicking the calendar button here, you can pick and choose what time range you're looking at. And you can change your view to day, week, and month, with day and week having time slots, month simply being a core information line. You can see right here under my print department, I do have several services scheduled out. These are color-coded based on the job's progress. By clicking into the week or to the month, I can see more details on the time that my services will take up. Do notice that the yellow cells represent the times that my machine department is not scheduled to allow operations to be performed during. While you can move around your services, either to a different day or simply around the clock, do note that you do risk scheduling a service at a time that's not applied to be an actual scheduled time if you click and move into it for the yellow bars. You can also forcibly extend this to change and increase the amount of time that a service will take. If you do this, you will need to jump into the details and update either the description or at least the title. So that way everything reflects the information you'd expect it to show. Double-clicking brings you into that list where you can pick and choose more information on it. The red line indicated here lets you know that you have another machine that's built into 2 different departments set to work within there. And from here you can view unscheduled tasks that have yet to be placed onto the board by clicking the unscheduled task button and committing them. In this case, I'll click my cutting service. I'll pick a time to place it on, and much like the other view, we'll select a machine, fill in an expected run rate, and we'll see the time frame that we can associate it with. It now falls off of this list because obviously you've scheduled it. And under our respective department, we'll be able to see exactly what I just put on the board. Alternatively, you can simply click the Add Task button to plug in something manually. You don't necessarily have to assign a specific machine to it. can plug a time frame to it, so that way you can basically book off a time frame that something shouldn't be allowed to be utilized by other work. The title is what you'll see here. So now we have a booked time frame that says we cannot do anything during this time, or schedule another operation to occur here without it crossing over into a new available time frame on the next day. The timeline view is pretty similar. Under here, you have a more Gantt chart where you can sort by your machine department to get a list of any of your machines within a department that have work outstanding for them based on the date range that you have visible. By default, because this is a timeline view, this is more or less a date-only view, not a month, week, or any other time period. Under here, this is a full 24-hour grid for your particular day. So you can see a list of all operations during the course of a day that your work's happening on. Like in our other screen, we can click and drag to move this to a different machine. And we can drag it as close as we want to a specific time, reselecting or typing in that time as we need if we can't get quite on the spot. You can also click from the right edge and drag it out or shrink it to either make the task take longer or shorter amount of time. Knowing that this doesn't snap to any intervals, so you may have to jump in and simply adjust the time to the nearest whole interval if necessary. Just like in the calendar view, the unscheduled tasks and the add task button do the same thing, putting in a service that has yet to be placed onto the board to the time frame that you need it to, or just filling up a time slot with anything that you deem worthy. That's everything for the dynamic job board. I'll take a look at a few reports that interact with the job board. We can take a look at some, for instance, the dynamic job board reports and task view reports, which are pretty much the same as what we saw in the main window. In here, you have much different sorting and filtering options. You can plug these in to do basically a sort and filter of data that you feel necessary. You also have the notes reports. Under here, you have a much simpler list of criteria to sort and filter by. And just like we saw in the other case, anything that we have that falls within the criteria of a date range will apply. You may not get results out of the reports from here simply because these are all designed to load dynamically from the DJB. But if you're confident with your criteria that you're plugging in, you can get these to pull reports up with filled data as you need. Additionally, you can take a look at the job time variance report. This gives you a concise breakdown of estimates and actual time to help determine how much efficiency is being completed for any one of your particular tasks. This estimated time is calculated by the quantity divided by the run rate, unless you're utilizing a print calculator item, which has its own method of run rate calculations. The actual time is the work marked against a particular task, and the variance includes the difference, allowing you to search by order number and also by date range to give you some more basic info. Any time entries logged in through the shop floor or through the job board's actual time instance can be locked and viewed in here in the service detail time clock. Under here, we can see that I did have some work done during this time period. My 45 minutes for 2 different jobs show me that I've worked for an hour and a half. knowing that you have the option to plug in different employees and different date ranges for different bits of data. Lastly, under the production reports, we have a view of the version status report by date range. Very similar to the version status view that we saw on the DJB. Where that one on the dynamic job board lets you break out column by column data for each version status. This is simply a column by column list for grouped version statuses. And here we can see that these at the front don't have a status applied yet. As you go towards the end, we can see that we do have some sorted out. Grouping by page let us know what we're looking at for other statuses. Now, these will reference open orders only. We also have the general production schedule report, which shows a list of outstanding tasks for any service on any job that is still considered open. In this case, you'll have the due date populated by the drop date, or the order header's due date if you only have one date on your job. And you'll have a breakout for each version as well as each drop. Finally is the machine department by date report. Under here, you can see a brief view of anything that you have scheduled to operate during a particular time frame. You can pick and choose your machine department, or even as far as your machine itself. A list of any employee, and you can plug in a date range. To see any work that's perhaps being done on a specific day by an employee or within any particular department. In this case, I can see that under my finishing department, work for this customer on this job for this particular service is set with an estimate of 1 hour, and the status information according to it is displayed. That's pretty much everything for our scheduling and dynamic job board training session. I'll prepare to take everyone off mute and open up for Q&A.